Good morning, Gen Rinpoche. Thank you so much for introducing us to Nagarjuna's precious Garland. And thank you, Katrina, for ably translating these for us. And welcome to all our online participants. We're happy you can join us. We'll begin with some motivating prayers.
To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, oneness gone, foe destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one gone to bliss, nor of the world, supreme guide of beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, dear the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When, O supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow. With pure bodies formed supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best supreme guide, to you I bow. With the supreme science face like a spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not, incomparable wise one, to you I bow. Great compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, filled of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms, unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom too, well established in the trainings, the holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all-seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, foreland, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you, may all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall a rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamniryatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
야, 다 딕송 겠나?
Yeah. Oh, thế đấy. Oh, để ta trên cái này có.
go to shuna ya wa.
ane tuwe ku
Go na
labzwa.
do it in ya wa.
Ore ngeli tuachi yose so.
Hello. So here we had a question relating to the 6th verse, talking about where it talks about transgressing the Dharma or passing beyond the Dharma, and if there is a difference between that and abandoning the Dharma. So gela ta sikte tukpe kapsu ta nudengi duje tseni shepe kapsu ta sikti peche tamgares chu mida. Ta chư mida tang chư dawala tang chư pongya gi kepa duge.
Kade si yabochi labda. Tambo gwane.
Lo, ani sikje trukpe gi kapsu,
Ya.
nudengi sikje trukpa,
sikje tukwa roba.
lare,
ane
dundang shedang jikpa tang, mongbe kangshik chư mida, rawa, chư dawa, chư le da, tang chư pong, chi tang chư pong, gi nyeba yorwa, di gi kepa duge,
that's cool. sikje tukwa yinba.
lare,
sikje tukwa ane dundang shedang sederwa.
lare.
ane karishikdo da labda hako.
아니 몽베 강식 춤이다. 그러봐?
야. 몽베 강시 추민다. 어려네.
아니 추다 상 추퐁 기 케바두게
추인다 세대 추는 대바시고라.
라레
네.
아니 지당 추레 데바 당 추퐁
추는 민다와시고라.
라레
야네.
아니 지당 추레 다당 추퐁 기 케바두게
슈달라서비다. 몽베 강시 추민다.
다 추다 당 지당 추퐁
되네.
먼저 추퐁기 예바 세계로 추퐁기 예바
추민다와다 가르를 개반도시도.
추퐁
추통세도 왜.
pong.
추퐁와 팡와
알아 추.
Yo mare.
정말 알아.
델라 요마레 이네
텔은
지당
멘다스도 텔은 개주요 말이시거라. 이거래. 텔은 나와서는 랍자들은 대버려 봐. 말에서는 저땅에서는 그 랍자들은 나와라 봐. 저땅 저 말에서는 저 마다나는 텔은 멘다와라 봐.
나레
어디래?
아니 추퐁기 예바 카레레스 슝디라 민두 이네 지당 추퐁
최통선한테
추퐁
최통선은 처음에 통화를 써요.
Again, pong. Pong.
추팡
Pong.
퐁바.
야, 퐁바.
최그 퐁바.
추팡바
야야, 최 퐁바. 최는 나와다 최래 퐁바 또 시켜봐 요라.
노
하서는 최대 개 말은 이제 독조대 제베들 쓰기라. 퐁바스는 그최 매발이야 퐁바스기라. 요새 이제 퐁바. 교보 밑교보 도들라 벤조게 퐁바로 와. 울부. 들 쓰기도 와. 다비들.
Pong. Sabata banner bong.
퐁바스들아 최기 퐁바스가 말.
Pong mare. Pong.
최 퐁바로 왜?
라레 그저잖아 지당 장샘기 예믹
최 퐁바스가 왜?
라레 예바 로와
나와다 최래 뽕바 패스 고치 버쳤는데 그래.
로 야야야 지와 디레샤
나
지와 디레 다 칠레 다단 츠팡기 케바 두게스
나.
오케이
그래서 최래 민다스도 최래 남민다스는 최단 개와 잡았더니 최래 대바로. 최래 민다스는 최나 신념리 చే스는 최래 민다로. 담질레 민다와를 코티나 신체로.
So I think that generally we can my pronunciation is lacking, so it's hard to get this across. So I mean, the language that is used in the verse, the sixth verse says like to not transgress the Dharma or sort of go beyond, and that means to not act in a way that is adverse to or in contradiction to the rules of the Dharma or what has been said. So if you don't lie, that is not transgressing the Dharma. You're acting in a way that accords with what has been said, and eventually getting to the right word, it's generally the same sort of idea of abandoning the Dharma. If you give up the Dharma, you're acting in ways that are contradictory to what has been said there. You're not acting in accordance with that. So in general, it's kind of the same meaning.
저기도
Yeah,
왜?
dig it again. Yeah.
그래. 봉바스네 그 봉바로 그 최대 매나 봉바로 빼줘 그 봉바를 을부를 껴버려서네 봉바스가라.
나래.
근데 단다 최래 맨다와서네 냠레체 최대서네 그때 최단 개화제버들서라. 독초라. 되래.
So one of my mispronunciations is to sort of be bereft of the Dharma rather than abandon it. And so we can kind of think of this as not just being without the Dharma, but actively acting in contradiction to those kinds of rules or sort of laws that are set out by the Dharma. So this is what is implied there.
저기도 왜? 저기서
Digitu, yeah, digitu.
지단 데려와 가서래. 소저바다부시그라. 소저바다부. 듬베스네 착베스고라.
나래.
사사고여 진짜 심전데 세기에서나 듬베왕게네 고심제세라. 그 착베왕게 심제세라. 아니 철레 대두요라. 뒤서야.
No, Dixon.
아니 되래. 야.
Yeah. So here, just looking at the commentary by Gyaltsab, for example, if we have a kind of like attachment, and the word that's used in the verse sometimes means like aspiration for, but here it's really attachment to something like meat, and we kill out of our attachment to meat, then we transgress the Dharma. We could say abandon the Dharma. Actually, is the word used here. So in the commentary, I mean.
되래.
Dixon.
몽베 철련 나와서네 빼나. 몽베 철련 나와서나. 아니 뒤가서래. 심제세나 개요 말에. 심제세에 대 군적은 나와래. 뒤세나 뒤바요 말에 가서 롱체 사야래서나. 아니 몽베 왕게 철련 대거라. 철련 나와라. 뒤서야.
So, for example, we can transgress the Dharma out of delusion, out of ignorance. For example, if we think, well, actually, the sort of higher power, God, permitted us to kill. Like all of these things in this world are for us to use and enjoy. And so, therefore, there's no non-virtue, no negativity in taking life because this creator God gave us all of these things. So that would be an example of passing beyond the Dharma out of ignorance.
철에 민다스나네 딘 독조더라. 가리wan도 시다다 공동하게 가리wan도 손나에 베나 커뮤니즘 비즈니스 최체 소마레세 결혼 게멜로주요라. 결혼 철로 땅게 인베스트 아가 철로 땅게 메스나네 세그레. 세나 세추네 철에 메다라 kon jigbe 철에 메다라 아소체나 생아 철로 땅게 메스나 jigbe 철에 메다라. 가시 오가 가르치 쳐 메타 쳐 야부레 mendo세 람네 직배 쳐len 나와라.
So yeah, Dixon. So generally this like transgressing the Dharma, so to not transgress the Dharma is to not allow ourselves to follow after whatever sort of delusion, ignorance, hatred, anger, whatever it might be, and therefore not transgress what the Buddha has taught. And so there are various examples of this, to not sort of give up the Dharma out of fear. For example, in Tibet, when the Chinese communists came and they sort of said to people, well, you have to give up your Dharma or give up your life. And people wouldn't do so. I mean, even in the face of that fear, to not pass beyond the Dharma, to not sort of acquiesce and say, oh, okay, yes, I'm not going to be a Buddhist anymore, to have that kind of fortitude and to not then transgress the Dharma rules out of even fear. This is what it really means here.
Oh, yeah, that do it today. Do it today. Yeah, oh, then. Oh, could they have just on go sooner? Oh, Gave sort of good in Butte. Gave sort of good in Butte. Geshe Tamba Nambi Ngak Belam, Kende Tandu Nambi Jungode, Chidar Nishi Taga Shepherd Chasun, oh, Shesun Bata. Gave sort of good in Butte, Gawasan Jechum Dendegi, sort of Tamjek in Butte that the Karesna in June the race ora. Nyesonge Tungele Nebrejua, Nyawal Kena Yabumedua, Tunge Mambudu, Idal Kena Petunge Mambudu, Tandul Kena, Tunge Mambudu, some telling Ebarjuna, Tete Tani Abumid, telling Ebardo, Rangi Tarwa Chekudu, something in Junkigara, Koe, Nyesonge Tungele Ebarjungara. Kibuchungu taking Nyesonge Tungele Ebarjungara. No, Nyawita Tandul Kena Tunge Mambuora, Sada Mileke, some Gora. Tieto Daliani, they are. Chudu standanga shegiwa, chudu shegdwa. Oh, what did you Casara? Ninjo say, Jasura Kuning between Ninjode, calling Evan Joas. Yasongi Tungeling Evan Joas. Kibuchungu taking Yasongi Tungeling Evan Jone, had a meet out of the Gara. Kibu drink the gay, or had a milk let and human Bawagi Pumbu Dolen Chekona. Yabu Medu some Toma Mebane Tandaba to Tindre, Tanda Mambana Tindre Tegochona, and then you serve a Medu some the telling about June. Let a human Bawagi, quite your Lemeguba. Quite your Coralia, had a meet your layer, Nijunki Gara. Jasura could you be testing in Junti Chera? Cassette and Banam Yangak by Lams, Cassette Chanju Sabat to Sigora. Tezuga Balam de Caresana, Chanjugu Semderwa. Simja Tamjala Chambadan Zawa, Tia Jet on the Shenji Tondo, Shele Jar Casura, Tagbe Shenchebas, Tadabadonga Razu Kanga, Susu Geshe Yeshe Thabkhe, Basa Shel Sawache Kanga Yongora. Chanju Sambatozuga, Tale Shenchebas, or Tati Toma Mebana Tendesha and Norsha, Tungajan Yonde, Tatan Tender Marasa, Samlokora, Kurju Tango to Sambarwa. 다다 셴 딱셴 치워서도 토마 메바네 라 제버지 버신도 다다 셴 제버지 토마 메바네 셴 야와도 와신도 다다 셴지 todo 라 르타 어 틀리하더네 딱셴 치 딱베 셴 제베 찬주고 섬세도 딱베 셴 제베 찬주고 섬 셴지 돈달에 산제지 고바 토바시게 겨kun세 여대군데 딘데신 주와 저기 인삼네 찬주고 섬들이야 Geshe Tamba Nambi Ngak Velam Sura, Geshe Chanju Samba Nambi Ngakpa, Ngak Junjenge, Lam Desi. Kende Tandu Nambi Jungo Desi, Kende Tandu, Kewadan Dembe, Koe Dongele Tar Denge, Nesongi Tongesa Maimba, Koe Dongele Tar Denge, Kewadan Dembe Kansatu Suwara. Tin Jungo Se Jusagi, Ke Cheshu Lamga de Karesna, Tongbani Togba Tere, Tongni Tobe Lamdela. In June chance, Yandak Betawa Sigua, Yandak Betawa. Koya Zawa de Danzirba, Nao Yambe Ganzinde. Or T in this Koya Chagdana Soba Yamapa Guina, Nao Yambe Ganzinde. Now some round Achik Yunashagua, Tipanguara. Tipan Tele, Yandak Betawa to Gora, Tombani de Gura. Or T did the Karashik Dosna. Ninjun Chansim Yanda Betawa Subuti Sungutwa, Ya Tichilana.
So to begin, as Jela Tsongkhapa has said, I'm going to read this in the order that it goes. The essential meaning of all the conqueror's scriptures, this path praised by the excellent conqueror children, the entryway for the fortunate wishing for liberation, I will explain as well as I am able. And so here, this first line, the essential meaning of all the conqueror's scriptures, all of the teachings of the Buddha, the Bhagavan, he gave with an attitude of renunciation, or for the purpose of generating a kind of renunciation, a feeling of definite liberation. For some, for those of the lower scope or the small capacity, they are thinking about renunciation from the suffering of the lower realms, thinking to not be born in the hell realms. What would the sufferings be like if they were a hungry ghost or an animal? And wanting to definitely be freed of those, they engage in the paths of various positive virtuous actions, like the 16 dharmas that we have been talking about here, that lead to a higher rebirth. And so on the basis of that practice, based upon this wish to definitely be freed, renouncing those sufferings of the lower realms, they give rise to a wish to engage in certain practices. And then the level of renunciation that is beyond that, for the being a middling scope, they think, well, even if I am born as a human or a god, having to take up rebirth due to the force of karma and the afflictions, being under the control of that kind of situation where I have to take up and cast off various aggregates without any kind of control, and have to take rebirth due to the force of my karma and afflictions. Well, this then is what I am sort of renouncing. I want to get out of that completely. And in order to do so, I'm going to pursue this path. So the Buddha's teachings encompass those different levels of renunciation. And then the next line reads, this path that is praised by the excellent conqueror children, referring to bodhisattvas. Bodhisattvas have praised this path of bodhicitta, the mind of awakening that comes from developing love and compassion for all sentient beings and bringing them to their culmination, based upon really an exchange of self-cherishing for the attitude of cherishing others. I mean, up until now, you have cherished others, cherished yourself more than others, and really thinking only of yourself, you have continued to cycle in samsara. So instead of that, one thinks to exchange those kinds of attitude in the way that one previously cherished yourself, learn to cherish others in the way that we normally neglect and don't think about others, to sort of cast aside our own needs and aims. And with that kind of attitude, thinking that in order to really be able to pursue the aims of others, I'm striving to become a Buddha, one who has eliminated all faults and developed all qualities, in order to be able to develop the qualities that benefit other sentient beings. And so here, that's the kind of encapsulated in the second line, that attitude of the mind of awakening, or bodhicitta. And then it says the gateway, the entryway for the fortunate wishing for liberation. And this is referring to those fortunate who want freedom from all of samsara, those who are wishing to get out completely by recognizing that the root cause of our taking rebirth within samsara is this ignorance, grasping at a self that then gives rise to all of our various afflictions of attachment and anger and jealousy and hatred and so forth. And so in order to get rid of that, one needs to develop the correct view, realizing emptiness. And so in order to, again, abandon this view of a self, grasping at a view of a kind of autonomous, independent self, then one needs to develop the kind of wisdom that is able to completely eliminate that, that can get rid of that. This wisdom realizing emptiness, the correct view. And so here he says, I will explain then these three principal aspects of the path.
Oh yeah. 어디 인도 단단가죠. 뭐도 주주주셔요 봐. 미개와 주디 빵백개와 주지에서. 네 대간들이야 창매 통화로 써봐. 숨제네. 죽숨제라. 대간들이야 아니 얌솔라마르 잡아. 개랑 잡아지. 숨제. 근데 간가 때문에 뭐도 주주셔도 와. 뭐도 하다 메고만 토베게 주디를 주주셔요라 단다. ane ti karesna ti dokcho dil chebe na ane ti nami dala nyawa yida tondru tu sul tigi wara Nyawala meke, Tondula meke, Yidala meke, Tondalia, and a church di Nyamsulamba ina, Nilada Meliki, still I'm going to church you do Sigdoa. What did you lamia?
So, right now we are explaining these 16 dharmas that lead to higher rebirth. And so there are the 10 opposites of the non-virtues, the 10 virtuous actions. And in addition, there are the 6 other sort of phenomena, dharmas, of not taking intoxicants and so forth. So there are those 3 that are sort of prohibitive, not engaging in in intoxicants, wrong livelihood, and violence or harm toward others. And then the 3 sort of positive, giving respectfully and making offerings and having love. And so these are then lead to a ripening result as a human or a god, the kind of opposite of these. If one engages in the opposite of these 16 dharmas, then the ripening result is that of a hell being, a hungry ghost, or an animal.
Oh, yeah, the Chita, Nyawa Yita to the yard, the Sant Koshita Shag Medua, Chita de Lambre to the Nine, to the Cash Gabachayora. Nyawalikena Tunga Karakari Yores, it is Sanye, Tanya, Tatunda Nyawalikena, Sigbe Tunga, Kagbe Tunga, and the chickbe to say Tupche that Tunga Mambu Yankuyora. Teacher, any Yidali Kiwi, and a co Saya Tunga man, a Kochaga, Donichi, Sajumara, Tonjumara. Tindese dead again, take on getting the order. Take on get to me, session when you get in the order. That don't do the other tone de door. Chile chick saw to me, Sarah, Chile chick saw the door. And then Chile chick saw to me. In a garage, make it call a Pechuchura, Chalana, she could say to Chigra, Sayako, Sikiran Shangazuko, Sagiora, Kiran Pakmanganzulko, Kiran Pudding Azulko, Kiragi Rugo, Choa de Lange in the Choa de Yabudunga to Zemutesa. Cashes and Yatos in Angazu Zemute, Kugu said, Segiora. Or Chesa Tezunga the Tonde Atera was to make a revute. What the Zukango Nation and some Guyora, Tindekena Mato and some Mevamara, Mila Yungudua, Kane Kashitenge Yungudua. Purdo and a cardinal and drawn sometimes teach a pay cane, and a track I got Kabachan and the Shingaman. Or go to share, catch a Kamalan share. County can draw cane, meditation, drama to Kagis Tegadon and a Dungur Sigdo. Meeting Yada Dungur, Condosacune. Don't go Condosagran, Karchan do any cottage charts Havard and draw to your Sigdoa. What in the generation Shingandoa, Kashitanga. Toshi tenge doa kala saya mene shinge mambure mugi chonsona. Toshi tenge do sigara. Ane chi se de tezuda ngazu tam nyawa da chikbo chikjan doa. Min bunda mambu mi trita mambu segi doa. Pama pugu kanga se tepe. Tile lagu chiye mengi se chik doa. Ta nyawa le tende yora. O ti inde tezu tonge de sheku yora. Ngarazu shenda mena mi lumbala de doa. Tene tone shikuya, kane shikuya, chiga chik se, tu tende che mile duwa, tendo yoba nashi. O tinde tozu kanga te tunga wa re samdele ngarazu tewarab chi sorga yora mato, ngeson le te tlada mi yagure mato chida tunga rashi chadwa. O tezu kanga samlo tane, tezu te kunjo ku sugu yo mare sigora nangba chena. Shenda chega songe yo nane soso che yo marwa. Koranzu kawa tana tana nyawa tana yida tana mili tana lonju chenpu chena pangu suna karsuna sura suso merwa, suso rama merwa. Tende ma resi war namba. Rarang suso ge kosum ge samlu tanda, kosum ge kewa le chena, debu tewa kewa sambu lingere. Rarang ge kosum ge samlu tanda ngeba tana, ane kewa ducha lingere tile tunge mambu yungere se tishe yora. Ti tanda tipe kachambur daase, soso kachambur daase. Soso nyasonga tungale kyab kuna kyam gente soso kyab togure daase. Karista kyam ngune de chödere daase. Tanda nga zo chö chudu shegora. Oti nyasonga tungale kyab ya tlada mele kyaga chö ngune kyam ne ngune de tire de wara. Chöla kyab su chewo se nga tiki kyab ki yoyose. Ti chigi yensi gora. 산제를 겹쳐서 산제 처랑 그 남가 때때 야보도 나디 이치여 어디에도 나 좀바 처랑 그 제수승 반나시 지기 인세 산제를 겹쳐서 오라 덤바보 네 철을 겹쳐서 돼 대초등에 지기 인세고 알아 오늘 겸게 대초대로 이 긴들을 겹쳐서 어 딘데 초대 야보 좀게 대solnga 감이야 다시 콘주 빼야버려 콘주 나싱에 간가 제토에 탑시 지기 인세 droide drobo pazo de control thinking ese kindle capture tisigora o tichilamya
So here, this again, these 16 dharmas are to ensure we have a higher rebirth. And generally, like in these texts, we don't see an extensive explanation of the sufferings of the lower realms. Although we do within the Lamrim, the stages of the path, see more extensive explanations of the various kinds of sufferings in these different realms. And today, often they aren't explained very much. But this is something where we have to actually think about this in order to generate a sense of not wanting to be born there. And so we talk about in the hot and the cold hells, the kind of intense, extreme suffering of heat, of cold, of being sort of burned and cut and so forth. These are the kinds of sufferings we see sort of likenesses of this in the human realm, but the hell realm is much more intense, extensive. And so too with the pretas or hungry ghosts, they are constantly searching for food and drink. They are suffering from hunger and thirst, constantly tormented by that and really unable to satiate it. And then animals, we can actually see the kind of sufferings that they undergo in terms of being eaten by one another, having to have that kind of fear. But really, the worst is at us, at the hands of us as humans. We use animals like objects. I mean, if we want their meat, we take them for their meat. If we want their skin, we take them for their skin. If we want their fur, we kill them for their fur. Or if we want their bones, or like elephants, we take their tusks just for our own uses. We really don't have any sense of them being sentient beings, but just use them. I mean, like things like we might just take them for sport, even. It's just become sort of a game to be able to kill and use these animals. We don't see them as actual other beings. And so here we can see the suffering of the animal realm, but just because we don't see the sufferings of the hell realms or the hungry ghosts doesn't mean they don't exist. And again, we can see sort of parallels to this in the human world. I mean, there are those who die from hot and cold. There are stories about, you know, in Tibet when they would be circumambulating Kang Rinpoche, for example, and it was really cold and snowy. If someone was starting to sort of die or lose consciousness from the cold, it would say that you should start beating them and really get them angry, get their blood to boil, so they sort of begin to come back to life. But these, we can see that these are the sort of sufferings that humans endure, although not on the scale of those other realms. There are many humans who die out of famine, out of hunger, out of lack of food and drink. They perish because of that. And there are those that are killed by other humans. I mean, we kill others on a grand scale, killing other families, killing entire families, fathers, mothers, children, and so forth. At the hands of humans, we inflict a great deal of pain and trauma to each other. And so here, we shouldn't, we need to imagine what it would be like to actually experience such an existence. And if we really think about that, and then we have a sense of wanting to avoid that, like I can't imagine if I were to be born in such a situation, then we have this sense of going for refuge. Well, we go for refuge in the Dharma. And here, the Dharma, like these 16 Dharmas for higher rebirth, this is something where, as opposed to other traditions that might assert some kind of creator, like made these realms or put us in those realms without any of our own control or input or something, here, this is not not how Buddhists see it. Instead, it is our own thinking, our own acts of our three doors, our body, speech, and mind, that create our future conditions. By doing good and positive acts, we will take a good rebirth. If we take negative actions, we are going to experience the negative results of that. So we are important, right? If we consider our own well-being important, then we need to protect ourselves. The Dharma is the actual protection. And so when we say, I go for refuge to the Dharma, that means that I will do these things in order to ensure my own good results. So the Buddha is the one who teaches us, who shows us this good path, but we need to follow after it for ourselves. So when we say, I go for refuge in the Buddha, it is in the sense of his being a teacher. And when we say, I go for refuge in the Dharma, it's that thought of, I'm going to do this Dharma in order to ensure good results. And going for refuge to the Sangha is really taking a sort of trust in others who are participating in a similar path, taking them as one's friends and examples in order to really have those companions on the path. And that is what it means to go for refuge. Most importantly, really being that real refuge of our own enacting the Dharma.
Oh yeah. 어디 인도가 소라. 산제 좀 된데게 송구도 와. 그 송구에서는 시베 송구 주제 람네네 계좌 남라 땡세. 시방에 송구 동에 냐오이다 동에 주제 길람가. 사다 멜레케나 코에 동에 주제 길람가. 어디 참마 고라기 냠수 녀네. 무슨도 캔네 시네. 네 계란술이 셰기 요송거라. 시베 송구 동에로와. 뒤주제 람댕에 천줄 셰기 요서. 네네 계좌 남라 땡세. 티신식바 뜸바데서 사제 좀 된데데 랑도르기 네데 뜸바보데르 다세 오늘 잠게데 가르스네 최드레 송거라 티신식바 뜸바데 계좌 남게 자고서세 모두 하다 미 고반 톱중에 송기 동엘에 겹야게 겹데 네 셰야게 최주두디레세 티케란주 제고레스 송거라 김마도 딜레 하고지 산제게 야 Kashe lalatan, kashe militan che yo mara, tapshi de songba ye songwara. Amji ki nasa traya tundal men de traya, labse jaya re mato shen koran che yo mara. Oti na shinwa, oti indo kasura. Sanje so tangi dagin gwenye des. Sosu gunjab de sosu che wore da songre. Shinda jili rawa che de yo mara se. 당이 다긴 거인데스 셴이 수신 것도 교르서 셴다지기 지지그래서 몰람저 대셔나 내니 오마르다 송거라 수고 접시 통계 요마르 연어 산제 좀 된데도 산제 상마 요래 지그러와 군접 가르쳐도 그랬으니 규딘데르다 디마신데 지에서 그래 디제나니 드레부데 용거래 디캡게 디캡템 바보데 테라 마도라 다와스 대셔 몰람 잡지 대셔 샤네 셴다지기 칭게지 요마르 근데 연하도 되게 와라. 어디 요 말을 다 송구하라. 남배 따와잖아. 당이 다게 고인데 셴네 수신 건데요. 레당 냠바 제발라 당이 다게 방부해서. 수수 개와지기도 미개와지기도 수수 따도 지에서. 수수 방부 수수 제고래서. 밀 방부제 말을 좀 민지대를 뜨네. 레 미개와때도 마치 야부 제고야 돼 요르와 공고자 틀으셔 줘라. 이나 쪼데 소수 방부쳐 그래서 어때인데 티게 첨부래서 티인데 단다데 뭔데 주주디 손디 테라 파파야 된데레서 예선숨을 계제 교디 송겨라 죽고야 된데레다서 대완 주제 교대 교와 상무 계제 교디 송겨라 어때인데 가르쳐라 어텐데 산제 송으래 단단가주 롭좀 제사데 오마렌지 청와대 대값수 원대 추단도 셰신바티레 내게레 추다 산제게 산투지 산제투지 규디 셰행고라 어 대답이 숑들이야 태바제 삼바제네 되나시 원도 하다 메고바 토바치기 타르바다 탐제진베 고바 토바치기 대체동에 사베 중게요 박샤샹게요 사베 답게요 산소소셈리야 네 섬리 짜침보쟁이나 소남 첨부사그라 어떤데 꿀은 세담 데셈버 슈세 야 된데
So here, the Buddha, the Bhagavan himself has said that I teach you the path that exhausts the suffering, the misery of samsara. And so the Buddha, based upon his own direct experience, his own cultivating this path and having brought it to its culmination, he says, then I teach it to you. But what is taught in terms of the kinds of realizations and understandings that I have come to, you have to do. So the Buddha teaches us the methods, what it is that we should and shouldn't do, but it's not as though he's able to do it for us, but rather we have to do it for ourselves. Just like the way if you go to a doctor for a cure to an illness, the doctor can give advice saying what you should do, give you medicine, but they can't miraculously heal you beyond you relying upon that advice and medicine. And so the Buddha has also said elsewhere that you are your own master and protector. You can't sort of look to someone else to be that protector for you. Again, the Buddha teaches these kinds of methods, teaches us what it is that we should do, but we can't expect that the Buddha will do it for us. It isn't up to someone else. It is up to us to do it. And so too, he continues saying that what you do in terms of what is good and bad, what you have and haven't done, you are your own witness to this. So we need to have a kind of sense of self-conscience when it comes to just for our own purposes, having sometimes translated as shame and embarrassment. There is that where we are cognizant of what others think, but really for ourselves, we are the ultimate witness of what we have and haven't done. And so the Buddha gives this advice. This is what you need to abandon. This is what you need to do in order to be able to achieve the kinds of good results. And so like here, we are explaining these kinds of 16 dharmas for gaining higher rebirth, and the sort of dharmas, the things that we actually need to put into practice, those actual refuges and protections, those sorts of things that will lead to the state of definite goodness and that of omniscience, of Buddhahood. Those explanations will come later. But here we should set our motivation thinking that how fortunate we are to be able to listen to this Dharma by the Venerable Nagarjuna, the Dharma that is giving us the kinds of instructions that we are able to put into practice. And not only that, as vast as we can make our aspiration for this, we are laying down seeds. We are creating imprints in our minds to be able to, whatever we can't do now, to do in the future. So with that sort of intention, we should set a motivation for listening to this Dharma.
Oh, yeah. Oh, the into Tanga to the Kasi something left the Yoba. Something cavaliers na. Oh, any charme tongas. Miki wachu di pa, lunga yesum ji miki wachu di pa, kewachu di trupure se shesara. Mundu topju chu shesara. Ta timado yo maribes na, oh, tanda ti yor dase, ti kares na, charme tonga di chigre sera. Charme tonga di chisha. Any soa sanse, ta mesi kedan di sheyorda. Mesi kedan di soa, tapshi kande chene mesi ke ure ti sheyora. Chama tonse, chande tona, sosu ludan semniga rama meba chigre se. Semle rama meba bas bisira che, any rakajin sine yota mambulangra. Any sogo be chari choriche rangsu tugumarwa. Ludan sem di be rangsu metumge. Rangshindu meneba songeng chande maton sengora. O ti tona chen dilaye cho mambu yungurela. Tele tene, mambalia nami ti yungure te miki vetandugora. Chang tona ane ti chene, ti gwa mambu sayatinde yungora. Metene, tinde bache, chambi tonda asira. Soa sanse, ti sha sarchamato. Ta soa sangbo, soa sida meze chudab disgora. 소소 매직게 동동도 물리나 레가라 제치 제고라 칼라라에 탑시 제 둘로다 칼라다 대서도 라에 탑시 제고라 델레 초아스도 추답스그라 매제데 초에 동다 매제데 선부체 내 동다 탑시 제 사에 통에 고에다 대서도 또 직튕기지 거라 디메네 시도라 자 매제데 추답스그라 매직게 단데 내가 가르치고서 계란 내가 가르치고 어가 lamga sugu sara nga amji lega chigu sara nga kege chigu sara o nga changma songe chigu sara lega chichagu do te chene ne 칼라사야데 튕기된 뒤도요라 어쩔래 수답시고라 초아상세 매세 깨다데 칼라사야데 초아상부체 록베 초아 마치 양답베 나지 팔라미야라 깨날 지요라 양답베 초아세 양답베 나세 양답베 레제 타세 드리고도와 어째자 매세 깨도 칸에 깨제세 속부 레가 제 근데 삼루타 생비 삼루타 니레가 제고요라 어때데 칸에 깨제세 매세 깨고 유나 천대 돈달 격진셔요라 저 트라마 책도 강가 소소 천대 돈달로 만데 교아치만 네거마도 패게요 마라 자고 메시지게 돈다 초아야부지 주 밀은 거고 마다 주마셰 트라마마셰 tuk시 마자로 저참 책수불람네 교대마 소소 때지 잘라르지 벤저 돈다 요에도 콘도세 자리 접텐데 마시시와라 와 책수부 마마 저 트라마 책수 텐데 돈에 초아게 메시지 초에 돈달 지 돈다 지 주에 돈달 지기와라 다나시 루제고네 현지 소체를 소바 소치바 마신발렘바 로임세로 어딘데 제주 강가데 방구르에서 초아상보 창매동한테 김바다 럽준이가를 봐 김바예나 창토교마 럽준나 창토교 말해서 거라 창매동다 초아상세데 초아상보 깨고래서 매주 추답도 상보 제고래 추답 로바 지기와 말해서 거라 뒤에 tel야 김바 쪽에나 내가 전에 제단 상스디 가진 로사로 진제야 저부터 에너지 장가자야다 야자야다 대zul시 내가 망보셔 거고다 망보여라 잘라르지나 tel야 해주제 원에디 간지주 사야르지나 밀레노나 마노나 르나노 마노나 마노알 망보고에서 망보양에 돈달 망보 소샤는 제 망보겸나 lokbe chawar ngone sente mi pajo de yang da ba choya tondal meze choya tondal sagyora sobo yabu ya tondal ko ne ge je soje ne ko chembo yong ko pesha mambule chana te madira lokbe chawar yora o tinashi lega trambo transha chane meze ke se khane ke je demba she yabu che milon gogo mata chuma she thama ma she ke je she ura mi de mi lega che ura leji choba chidu sa ode 류지 줘봐 추답도 양답을 권에 세고래서 그나 미영원에지 소수 내가 제대 제 디패션 유지마도 라그면나 디 라테는 메시게는 그 양답을 소화하게 그래 그 메시 추답도 양답을 되어래 다 디메데 면 고고다 저주셔 때네 고모보다 마보 영에 탑시 지소 되잖아 lokbe 소화로 그 추구이나야 lokbe 소화하게 그래 어디에도 소화 상세야 돼. 기바 주에나 내가 주도 파주네 내가 원에 전에 땜버쳐고라. lokbe 소화스 뺀데 차샤나. 소수티 내가 제던다 빼샤라 라살라. 내가 대 야부 마셔 제다가 서샤나니 또 lokbe 소화래. 내가 제사나 실라살레 때 내가 원에 야부 제데 양다베 소화래. 겨울주요래. 현달 뱅기 와라. 지솔 뱅에 내가 지고라 내가 간거데. 지소를 고야에 내가 자 지기 와라. 대치되는 양답에 소화서 그라. 근데 소화 상세 소화 상부 깨우래서 돼. 디라. 다 럽도 좋아할래. 김바디 다 롱버 태야 마트에 다다 팀다 메팅 받아만 부채요라. 밀롱고고 땅에다 잘라나 지트야다 둘로나 지트네. 제나 미하마고 소시 텐데 마치서 와라. 양답에 소화 깨우래서 디체. rabdo chuma zuena tinde lega shida chigi o mara tangi me le lo suena tinde den dawa shida o mara kaina chamchang li ade doana le mise den rabdo chu tambo ko kimba che ponle mambu yeba che chema rabdo chu ponle je ko yona 총 제베 다 빼줘 양 탑시 제고 데 산제 나와요래 미 버저 데 배샤 마데는 저기요 말와 어디야 믹스에 총 제로 텐데 제야지 요래 강에 셴부시다 요바다 텐데 qab리네 아메세는 마도신 텐데 제초 말도 텐데 가서 rab도 중앙적다 록총 가셔야 되라 미주 대바랍 제 직도 제티제네 소소 최자자 제대 밀랍제 제티제 대치요라 어디에 가서라 제 벤조데 제 용공데 야 소야 된다래 또저 담에다 챘네 용에 지겨마 라마 kunju제 kadul te chune chuma 다 차샤오르마도 밀레치 개바샤 거고 다야다치 미치기 야구제 벨레시 근데 담에다 지겨마라 담부데 가르스네 디레도 가시래
Okay, Dichi Gyuna?
어디 디바도 지겨려 망다
No, no, no.
로자 왔다기 되겠지 망다스노 게랑에 요로세 남네 야가래 받아 참 저기야세 야
So I've been given permission to remind Geshe-la I need to translate sometimes. Here then we have gotten to the 10 non-virtues are to be abandoned, and the opposite of those, the 10 virtues, are to be cultivated. If you ask then, well, is that sufficient? Well, no. It continues by listing these next 6 dharmas for higher rebirth. And so this really takes looks at how we live our lives, how we conduct our lives. And the first of these is to abandon alcohol or intoxicants. When we take intoxicants, we lose control of our body and our mind. We might do all kinds of things under the influence of alcohol and other intoxicants. And in dependence upon that, I mean, really, when you lose control of your body and mind, it's likely you will do things that are not virtuous. So abandoning intoxicants is the first of these because you lose that kind of control over your body and mind. And the second is related to having a right livelihood. So here we have to work, we have to sustain ourselves, support ourselves, we have to make an effort in order to get food and clothes and shelter and all of those things that we need in order to sustain ourselves. And so, I mean, we often even like identify, like people will ask, well, what do you do for work? It's kind of something that we is very integral to our life. So we might be, like, oh, I'm a road worker, or oh, I'm a teacher. I do this kind of, other type of farming or whatever it might be. But we should try to sustain ourselves with a right livelihood, something that isn't contrary or isn't acting in ways that are non-virtuous in order to get the things that we need to sustain ourselves. So we have in the Eightfold Path the correct livelihood. Right livelihood is part of that, along with like right speech and other things. So often we have to speak for our work. And so what we say, when we say things that are lies, that are divisive, that are harsh, it is really for the purpose of this life. We don't lie in order to get something for our future life. We won't get something for our future life. And so to act in a way in our livelihood, in the way that we go about sustaining ourselves, such that we are not cheating, not lying, as we talked about before, like sort of altering the scale or cheating a little bit with the kind of equipment, making these various machinations to get a little bit more for ourselves. When we engage in things like fighting and getting angry and so forth in the course of just trying to make a living for ourselves, that really goes against this principle of right livelihood. So here, when we, some take on a livelihood that involves, for example, killing, that would also be a kind of wrong livelihood. So when this advice to have a right livelihood is applicable to both those who are householders as well as those who are ordained, should both have a kind of right livelihood. But here, when it's more, I mean, whatever sort of business or various kinds of endeavors one might make in order to sustain one's life, if you do so in a way where you are just trying to get more profit for yourself, like say putting questionable different parts in things in order to be cheaper, or like putting some sort of filler in food that might not be safe for people, it might be harmful to their bodies, but we're doing it anyway because it's going to make more profit for us, or like putting some sort of chemical or some sort of additive in something that we don't know if it's safe, but oh well, we'll make more profit. That is all wrong livelihood. So we should do work in a way that is honest, that we speak truthfully in a way that accords with right livelihood, where we aren't stealing from others, we aren't cheating, we aren't sort of killing. And we might think like, oh, well, it's okay if I do these sorts of wrong things because then I'm going to get lots of money and then I'll be able to do beneficial things. Well, not really. It's wrong livelihood. So we shouldn't do our work in that kind of way, even if we make little money, but we have this sense of we're doing things in an honest and straightforward way, in a non-harmful kind of way, then that is something that is good. And wrong livelihood can also sort of be an attitude towards one's work where you think like, oh, I'm just doing this for the paycheck. You don't even really put in very much effort because you're just thinking about getting your compensation for it. Really, all work or most all work is for the benefit of society. And so you should be undertaking it with that kind of sense. And so there are many ways that we can sort of have a wrong kind of livelihood. And when it comes to those who are ordained, there are particularly sorts of a wrong livelihood that are extra applicable. We will get into those. But when it comes generally, at the time of the Buddha, those who were ordained would not be engaging in various business endeavors, but there are certain situations in which that was permissible. For example, if someone during their householder life took out a lot of loans and then becomes ordained, if there's going to be problems from them not paying off their loans, then they need to be able to work in order to be able to pay off their loans. And so here, the kinds of wrong, I mean, it ends up being the case that those who are ordained engage in activities to support themselves and have livelihood. And then we will get into the particular kinds of wrong livelihood that are for those who are ordained.
Oh yeah. 다티나네 럽도 중앙sol이야. loksunga lokbe choa. 미스케 그 튼진 사회 통해서 서버 공연을 서버 대주 용해 된다리야. lok바제네. 수단 팀버 멤버제네. 네 좀나 loksunga 쓰용도 와. 디 럽도 중앙sol에 줘. 디 당부대 가르스나 loksun가를 당부대 출시 세더라. 출시 코란 류기 남주다 지케제 셔단다 도 남주디 많이 바셔져 거 그게 벤조 용해 된다 지 션다 지 용해 된다. Cholam tozu pe namjida mendara bchechi kachinga yenten chimbu tokpa nye yose sundab tinte shiyata o ne namjida mendara jani yendera kanga tokpa dabu chingwe shi sundab jamida yendondo shiyata tinte shiyani degi omare te chitan kongwe shi yungen yina ya rabdu chunga yina chogi omare kare sin chigengwe shi yobe shiyasha ngangwe shi yendondo imikage tili kushab chanani shandage o nga zu chikpa chego nga chi sakusa ani mena ngo shi yondo to che chekzin shaya sa ngo tsugu yoda chezan ko tenpa lab chogu yomar tenpa teya trachumba yinsi nga trachumba yinsi lab digi yomare o ti karasi ni shandage o koli chetong shira cha nga zu chekma do nga trachumba yinsi shaya tinte sunda yonga nyaga yoda o ti yende ko 소소 셈리 교로 땅에 가래는 교와 땅고래 네 르가게 쳬버를 미겨 마요체 약보체 대체고는 마도 라멘다 남주된 라멘다 치 탑대도도 제메레 dimbakyula rangsor shaasegdo separa gyura tang kunju chede chi topsu chi chen dondo chi gyo mare shere namju ti chi dang mina shi tuba che ta chi ba che yang ro ko de sung gara ya de chi lam na o telen dire da ka shere chu chu sede nye ba da ku ti ton nye ku ne lan de si gara rang chi yo ton da ya ene shen ji da ya chi ning gu byo re de pune kantra sam byo ro che na sam o te da ten do nge ten de truba che gen sam ne so so kunju to la gyo ta ne chul chu nam ju ten de chi me na be shibu chi gi kom ja gi ndo da chi chi gi ndo do ten de sia chen de go mara mo ti ju lam na chu chu stam bo te da ya
So, here then, in particular, the kinds of wrong livelihood. I mean, to get the sort of conditions for this life, we need certain kinds of conducive conditions. We need food and clothing and shelter and those sorts of things. And so, to do so in a way that is an improper livelihood is by various means like cheating and lying and stealing and so forth. But then, particularly, there are the five wrong livelihoods beginning with, and these are primarily applicable to those who are ordained, beginning with, and I'm going to translate it as hypocrisy. So the way that one is sort of acting with one's body and speaking and so forth, you sort of change that in order to make it look like you are, say, a really good practitioner. So when it comes to like a donor being around or something like that, to make it seem like, oh, you're doing all of these austerities, or oh, you have certain realizations, or oh, you're sort of putting on this show of having made a great mental transformation in order to try to get something from someone. So if you are, say, to pretend to have gained certain realizations or have kinds of clairvoyances, and to put that out there, it's actually said that you're, even if you do have such clairvoyances, you aren't to go around saying so. This is something that could cause a kind of jealousy in the other monks, thinking like, oh, we should all be equal, so I'm going to say that I have clairvoyance too. Or like it's said that even if one has become an arhat in a monastic community, you're not to go around saying that you are an arhat. It's something you kind of keep to yourself. And so too, if you have achieved some kind of clairvoyance, that's wonderful, but you don't go around proclaiming it to others. So, as it says in the 7-point mind training, you should sort of change your mind, but not alter your external behavior. So really, mental transformation is the main thing that one should be engaging in. And then you don't sort of take on this pretense of having made some great transformation. So we should remain sort of, this line says like, change your mind, but remain as you are. We should act in accordance with others to a certain extent. We shouldn't try to make these kinds of dramatic behavioral changes, particularly in order to try to elicit some kind of donation.
오야 다 니바더라 니바더 쇼롱스기도 쇼르브 찌네 파고 로야 셴다치 구주르스탄자 로야 ton다 시와라 테니바다 텐데 랑리치라 나서 둘로다 잘라르부터 치사에 가르라나 삼겨라 어디체네 티카소라 쇼롱스기도 셴지 셴다리아 켈로 셴다치리아 홍신더부지 야부시라데도나 아나 계란티 롱스페 야부도 와서 셴다 수테 쇼세 ngala tende je ko ye de ta ta da chin da chi ra gu me do se tende je she ne ko shen da chin da yo ser bu tende she ne ya ko ra ye ti wa ra o tende che ba te ya ne shong long se do nga ya de ta bu ji ra na ye ku de ta da chin da ra ma so se re chen na ta ngala chi ku ye sam shen da tu za ha ko ne sam san ten yo ra o ti che ya ti chi la me shong long se de ni
카삭 디 드로사스에
ah
카삭.
가사 뒤에서 뭐 가사 담말래 말서 야 추슈된 데서
음,
추슈라
나를.
어디 니봐야 가사는 어디 때더라 가사 때더라 그뭐 대전야 깨져 다 잡으셔야 진다다 요사 진대셔도 근데 나 다른 분에 도와 용한다세 나 사편에 도와 다른 분 용한다 키라즈 단달 용한다세 나 다른 분에 용한세 키라즈 단달 용한다세 오라 ane kiranzu sunam shimbure dodo shegiyore, rwa. Kiranzu ne padam madan dra ngale pe kanga rokwa che yabu chigi yose wara. Ane nge kiranzu liya ne rokwa chigi yose, chingi yose ta chogi labjoro so kari na tinde ti chigi yose. O tinde se nyeba yabu tobe tondal kunu, tinde kirne o tinde lamna ane degi omarwa. Tila kasa asere, ya ode.
So, here, we have, then next, I'll just go in the order that, Geshe explained them. So first, is, soliciting, we could say. And so this is, like when we see that someone else has like worked in a particular way and they were able to get something from that, we think that, well, like looking at, for example, like say someone went and was begging for alms, and you look at what they received and you think like, oh, that's really nice, and so you say that to them, and maybe you even put out there like, I'm really looking for a donor. I could use someone who's able to give me something like that. So sort of going out there and kind of soliciting for donations in a certain way. Like looking at someone else who has gotten something really nice and sort of putting the word out there, like I too am looking for someone that would give me something like this, and sort of wanting to be able to put the word out there that you are seeking as well. And then there is the kind of flattery. So this is really the second one in the order. And it like from wanting to get something from someone else. Like you might say like, oh, you like I came from so far away just to see you, like you are really important, and sort of again like buttering somebody up or flattering them in order to get something from them. So you might even be like, well, oh, I'll be generous in return. Look, I'll give you this Dharma instruction or Dharma advice, but the pretense is really in order to get something from them. So you're sort of praising or flattering others in order to again solicit some kind of a donation from them.
오야 다들아 쇼로 딤바
Mm,
론다게 셰테라
나를.
아절레 론시도 야부지라도 나와 결혼데 빼야부도 와세 나 텐데시 고기데 탄다 친다 라마 송세라 나 텐데시 종내 야부도 데 탄다 라마 송스타티 소소니바 양야게고 군웅게 꾸네라네 텐데시 와라 오 제리 아티시도 오 가세 쇼론세 야 되지라나
So yes, then we have this kind of soliciting. Here, like for example, if someone went and got alms, and you are sort of like, oh, look what you got, I'm really looking for a donor like that, and you have this kind of motivation, this attitude of wanting to get something for yourselves. You're sort of putting it out there with that desire to be able to get something.
오야 근데 다 톱지 지어왔어야 되라 톱지 지어왔어야 돼 다 예보다 진짜 용하게 삼류꾼을 안으로 아니 그 진짜로 진짜를 하시고라 결혼되는 게 파다 마단 자와 있어 서버이 저기서 결혼이 파말이서 결혼 파말이야 야 대바전에 표서를 로봇에서 수요시고라 진짜 나리야 야 대바전 표서를 수요시고라 내가서 짐벌이자와 진사디스와라 소발라 짐벌이자와 수실라 짐벌치고 술이야 가서를 준비를 제 묘화표기 있어라 아 케지 김도서 내가 그런 그저 나랩도라 그런 김도 어느 다좀 벌레비와라 다세 그런 저 선남 쳔부레스 장아 다좀 보인다 대셔라 아 그래서 선남 쳔부레스 아네 근데 제대로 결혼 좀 깨져셔야 돼. 좀 받은 냠도 땀마에 깨져. 그거 상부터다. 견주 깨봐 상부를 해서 그래. 근데 전에는 그 롱주 용해였던다. 탑시시네. 좀 멤버를 인도도 다시 기도고 토면에 톱선도도 전적이 오마라. 근데 전 뒤집에는 안에 뒤래게 오라 가서라. 톱진 자와래서. 음.
Mm.
야, 어디서?
So, then, yeah, the following that soliciting, we could say, is then expropriating, is sometimes how it's translated. So here again, with a thought that has a lot of like clinging to desire for obtaining things. Uh, like you make this kind of like when you talk to others, it's like you say to them, almost like, I mean, the person who is most kind to us in our lives, like, who do we rely on or look to more than our parents? And sort of talking to them in that way, like, oh, who is more generous with us than our parents? And maybe not saying it directly, but sort of being like, oh, and there's an arhat staying here. Again, sort of setting the kind of conditions wherein you pretend to have some kind of realizations or pretend to have some sort of qualities in order to expropriate, in order to take advantage of, like, they think that you have some sort of qualities and you have implied or made it seem like they have some sort of resources, or for some reason should give that to you. You're kind of setting up the conditions for this, and this is expropriation.
뭐야? 다 예배 좋아 되려도 예배 좋아서나 아니 야 결혼 신다 줄었네. 지도 당에 멜로서라 개분다龍 충주 개부 망부요라. 개부도 좀 많죠 신다 지요라. 아니 알이야 지 개부 지게 아니 최고다 지야 동실로 소바tin test 내 말랑 봐 인세. 근데 개부 지게 다르다세 랍기요라. 어딜랍도 어디 코란 개부침부터 저게 걸로 kushap치도 디 가진지 인사를 삼네. 진예바데 텐데 부와 용그를 삼 kul롱 창겨와라. 텐데 전에는 데리가 가서라. 예배 좋아하셔야 돼. 대산데 개부다 텐데 제요 말아. 망부요 말티 손자 친다 지지지게 갈 지지 때서데 나 먹을라비 인세. 가셔문에 야 텐데 라고데시고 말아 들문에 있는 거 랍샤겨라. 되네. 근데 지말은 대지지지게 돼야다. 근데 진다 지지게 돼서 근데 랍겨라. 신다 용해 전달이야. 들려 안에 예배 좋아하시기도. 야, 그래.
So, here then we turn to kind of calculated generosity, or seeking out sort of things through being generous oneself. So here it's uh, like, we're talking at a time where there used to be sort of small kingdoms across this area, and so there were various little kings, smaller sort of regions of control, and people would go begging for various alms from kings. They were the largest kind of patrons of the monastics, and so someone might like go around sort of saying like, oh, this king and so forth gave me this thing, but I didn't even sort of need to take it. And you're doing this with the kind of wish for like a greater level of generosity. So you may either sort of make an implication that you didn't have to take the generosity from this other source, or thinking that by giving a little bit, like if one is to say offer a little something, you've heard that this king, gave to other people all these various like robes and bowls and so forth, that if you offer a little bit of something, you will get something in return. Or really one thinking that if I sort of act generously in this little way, that I will get something larger. This is the sort of calculated generosity that is the fifth kind of wrong livelihood.
뭐야? 단들레 소한테 로중한테 대소. 다든다도 그 가서 오라. 초아 깨단데. 신다가 야구제 표되잖아 되러와. 소소티라 탑시체 담메다체네 요에 신자 첨부체네 된대체네 말와. 강에 여바다 된대체네도 그 랍도 총한테 코라 소소 초아티 지금 엄마랑 멜로서 산제 좀 된데 코라 개부 세러와. 루두카와체서는 산케서는 신다 나네 소아당 아슈스네다 당용구라. 팀마당아체 티나인데 가르스네 김두 팹네. 지단 대두사이네 외메도도 나를 쪼대 칼라스야 마도 칠로시라 돈야 로스미도아 Di zang tezo shala de pyu che ne konzo le che shaya da tendre kukab yungu re kone. Di che mi mambu dan drawa yunga da tendre tanda zo che na gudwa. Di ko tsoa de sosu tabshi che mogo che. Tene shanda teba pingere chung driksu chung na. Tendre che ne sosu che da tendre lobzong che da shanla lobzong che da zo re dwa. Sosu ke daas tegyo mara. Sosu lobzong che ba te yendan samlu tangdang tuzu mi chi zol pa pen to do te labje ja go ra che she go ra son yong de du za che she go do ni ma nga zu de ka sura kya wa chamba de she ne de je kya wa chamba go bo yo ra kya wa chamba go bo de ni ma ke long ka bli ya ke long chamba se do ene chanju samba che du chanju samba chamba se che sang ge che du sang ge chamba se do 고 선녀문 저도 김자를 나도 김자들의 참배 주셔요라 나들의 직질을 써와체 로아 대화다 tren드다 강에 맞게 버셔제 잠재권의 초구를 쓰셔요라 대셔야 돈달 정보전 돈의 주셔네 잠배심을 그 맞tum나 칼라사요 말 선님 시게요 말에 그래서 참선을 님한테 현재 주선다 칼라마사 슈가 진짜 용부를 루지 용부다 어디인데 ya tinte chen ya techi tuna tende ya.
So, here, again, these sorts of wrong livelihood are thoughts of like, well, if I give a little bit of something, somehow I will get something back. Or if I put on this kind of pretense, really, all of these wrong livelihoods are driven by a strong kind of clinging to things, to wanting to get, to wanting to have these various kinds of possessions. So, again, thinking about the kind of context of the historical Buddha, who was the son of a king at his time, the tradition was really for monks to go and just beg for alms from various households. If you think about it, most of the households, not the women were not out at work, but would be home cooking food. And so the system was to just make do with what they could get through that kind of begging, through that kind of going around and getting alms. And so in order to be able to like receive those alms, they would give in return an explanation of the Dharma. So they are able to engage in their studies, they're kind of living an itinerant lifestyle. And as they go and beg at various houses, they then have that opportunity to give an explanation of the Dharma to those who are supplying them with food. So there is a story about at the time when he was still a bodhisattva. So we talk about the Buddha Jampa, the master Maitreya, or sometimes when he was still a bodhisattva, before he had attained that state of Buddhahood, that he would give teachings on love. And so when he would go to a particular house in exchange for that food, those alms that he received, he would give this teaching on love. And if the household was not sort of a suitable recipient, maybe he would go 7-8 days of not actually getting any food from anyone because he gave teachings in accordance with the sort of needs of various disciples.
Ya, ta tunda jiri lozu, tezu papa ne sowa yangda bako ne, ane tsogo resi rabdu chunga kimba kari ne rwa. Tende ko rabdu chunga sowa nime lo su che te chidu, lobzo rangche samgi samlu tangda da chu ko le ting sabu sanje da tezu sung shabu mambu yora. Tezu kanga jachambu sabji jacho ting sabu ba shengen de kugu yora, ti shengen de mena ni yamdu rwa. Peja yona ku pengi marwa, peja ke katra agi marwa soos. Katana haku marwa. Ti chu jachambu shirare, tezu le tesam jenge, kori jangjang toliya mesi jenge tinte che kugu yora. Ti yona ane jigden kamla ko ngon jikibu tamba tuzu song shagenge, labza tuzu mi mesi kye tangda, semliya gyurchu tangye da, jense na shi chigi chi se chigi chi tupchu tang tinte jangjang chaya nyanga yora. Ti yona ko tene jense le duwara chayora mi, samlo mambu tang tuwara. Tinte mewa tunda liya mi cholam da tsowa kye tangda, chigi chigi drawa chiya, chamba da tsawa da kongchunga je chado maji chigi chigi tongju maji se, ti labza de kugu yora. 근데 대장장 더 내가 챙겨지 같이 고고요래. 뒤에는 지금 감들이야 계속 간가 내그러 와. 전에 매 마음을 팬다고 쓰그라. 창박에 산재 좀 된데 처음 말씀이지. 도시대를 수도야 수고도 와. 산재에서 사부시라래 다들 샤나 샤라 팬도 타고 말해. 송구도 와. 얘는 전부는 맨들 전부는 들이야. 매도 빼만 빼지 매도 빼만 가서 추월래 샤그래 가서 추 강래 샤그래. 전부는 들래 매래야 시럽 치존 나서 요새. 빼면서 시럽 첨부터 요아는 정아 요아는 매신게 요아래. 걔네 매만부치를 팬 타고래 소로지 수고도 와. 어디는 시체는 미치존을 길래 팬 타게다 미 남주 같이 좀 모여라. 다 같이가 다들 용해 매래. 다고 신체 보세요. 잠바다 닝지 탐절리 찍바적으로 콘도 사주와 말으시나 매스께 매베스를 소르거라. 콘도 당하게다 차도 매는 미치존은 롬메동 것을 소르게와라. 어쩐데라 레데와 말어. 진짜 대고 너희 기부 담바도 남세대 내고도 지게질이야 셔야 주지. 그제는 지내고 뒤도를 고고에 뒤게 심부려 되어라. 야, 뒤질라. 안 돼 그래.
So here, the Buddha then spoke whether of one is ordained or a householder, the importance of right livelihood, of sustaining yourself in a proper kind of way. And particularly for those who have become ordained, their primary pursuit is really to think about the Dharma, to study the Dharma, this very profound and extensive Dharma. And so they are just staying away from worldly activities in order to be able to give rise to an understanding of that kind of vast and profound Dharma. For the Dharma to remain in the world, it needs to be realized. It's not just enough to sort of have a knowledge of the text, where if you're separated from the text, you don't know anything anymore, but you have to have the kind of knowledge that really is from ingraining it in one's mind. And those who are really studying that Dharma can't be totally separated from the rest of society, where then society is just sort of operating in this kind of like predatory way, where others are not thinking about each other, but just their own kind of profit and gain. And so that sort of situation, to be able to give advice to those who are living in the world, who are living in a society in accordance with their understandings. So here we need to be able to live and sustain ourselves and so forth, but to do so in a way that is not contrary to the Dharma. This really is a part of the advice that Buddhists give, or that those who are ordained are able to give to those who are sort of within the world. And this is the only way that the Dharma remains, is through being explained one to another and passed down in this unbroken continuum. And so when the Buddha had first attained enlightenment, he didn't teach the Dharma immediately, thinking that it was too profound, that there would be those who would not understand and therefore it wouldn't be of benefit. But it was Brahma who encouraged him, saying that, there are many different types of beings, in the way that sometimes a lotus will bloom under the water, sometimes it is on the surface of the water, sometimes even above the water. There are those of different levels of understanding. So there are those who are very sharp, who will be able to understand this profound Dharma. And so holy beings, explaining it one to the other, passing it down and keeping it alive in that way, this is the only way that we are able to have access to the Dharma.
야. 다때는 간좀 죽배 추숨지. 담아 죽숨 로차서. 미그 주바 개와 주주배 직세. 디제리아 안에 추숨지 셰사서. 다데는 죽배 추 담아 도에 되 빵에 되게 셰라. 다데 니를 개바도 제고를 따선 죽배 추숨지 셰기도. 디제리아는 주주주리도. 문제 주주주 성원마다 메고바 통치기 그 주주스 셰기와라. 어제는 죽배 추숨지 셰기와다. 그 가르스는 귀신 당시도 침바당에 도저 강가 그베고네 침바당 그래서라 롱주 침바당게네 고교로 제 시부지나 그 다가서 육배선도 제 소수 마구베 제 소수 락베 마트인데 시교 말해서라 대초지 침바이나 다와래 sansingi chimbana tagare, minjibwe chimbana tagare, mi chobo shibuje, kange shibuje, yone ko be, tongju maje be, yawoje ko chewadan chede, kushabdan chede ko chewure, che shenge yene ko, shesatilia kushabdan chede, che shewure si yora, kube se, kuchin se tira, ne, kuchin dan se, kube chimba se, tika se gore se na, choye cheba se, choye be kansa tula cheba, nyeba tuwe se yora, pucha se kdo, choye se, nyeba tu se yora, kagali ne, pama ke mata pita ke, pucha se ure se gre, shabdo se ure se, nyeba tu ure ta, kabu ya se, tiyinde kaso re. choyo cheba, choyo be kansa tula cheba se ure. Ane chamba, anzo namgyu damba dungura, simje tamje tewada tewe judan demba juchi se ra, tungay da tungay judan tewa juchi se, chamba tseme, nyingji tseme, tangyum tseme, kawa tseme sikura, tewada tewe judan demba juchi se, chamba de se ra, tewada tena sam, yaga tewa chuna sam, tungay da tungay judan tewa se, nyingji tseme se ra, simje tewa tewa, tungay mebe tewada medrewa juchi se, kawa tseme de se ra. Kola kange mebe che tanda tewa che top tena, yabu re, ti tanda kama che tina shi, teya yongna yabu doa sam ti she go ra. Shenji ti toba tila susu kawa kum go ra. Nga razo ne chado che nyanga yo ra. Shenli yabu chunsu ne chado che nyanga ti ma ra. Shenli yabu chunsu ne kawa kum go ra. Tila kawa che me si go ra. Ane nire chadangi da doa tanyum si do tanyum che me si go ra. Ta nga razo le susu nambi da chulu da miri da shabu chi keba che go ra. 당원에 전에 그 심지에 대화 동행 연계지 초아 직관 연계지는 소소 직발에 되어라 소소 팔라 두자시 따는데 퍼져도 출라 두자다 그라 티치 도르마도 개요 말아 대화 돌라 동행에도 봐 상마 직발에서 술라 동행요 고구마를 상말 대화 고구려서 잠바다서 땅념식도 미래 차단이다 대화 땅념을 내가 주시 뒤인데 뒤 숨디 쉐거다 다 땅부대라 Chimbarjave yu namla rangi la dani biwala soba kuchin sikdwa. Soso chala te na soso lakba kushabda chedi abu shirwa. Ani labja kage inadra, mijikba chimba chinge inadra, kanga kushabda chedi chegure sikwara. Kuchin sikdwa. Ti nyamso lancha re shara. Ti chimba tina mambu dura, chala kaso. Longju chimba chanja mara. Ani choji chimba labja kage kanga tina dugdwa. 아니까 소리 매다 르네트 줄라게 가가 미직 배신 배장 루도 소리야 소 체야다 시에 냐가 요르 tuzo roba chiwara kange yose tuzo kanga sayam rakyo ne me kanga sayam me thome me tinde da tesa me tinde tuzo kanga rudo sa mangcha mele chizol ko yoba chang de de lega che sama mangcha 다 미세 잠밤다 수트데 네 관심마도 셴다티 밀고 고자로와 서때서 강가 양다 보셔네 최레게 와라 담보 간주 최최시도 담보도 소소 제대 최레 교고라 내가 가르치기 나야 길 하삼 남다 제베네 셴레 팽기 와라 근데 최레 개와래 두고 와라 어디를 sab거라 그신시야 야 대줄람나 담보 그신된다
So here then we've explained those 13 things that are to be abandoned, what is to be gotten rid of in terms of the 10 non-virtues and those three phenomena. We didn't really go through it, but abandoning harm being the last of those. And then we turn to what is to be done. And so this comes in the sort of second half of verse 10, where it says, being respectfully generous, honoring the worthy, and cultivating love. And so here, these three are the sort of positive things that we are to engage in, beginning with being generous in a way that is respectful. So if we say are being generous materially, giving someone money, we shouldn't be like just throwing them that money, like throwing it at them, not wanting to touch them and so forth. That kind of disrespectful type of generosity is really not the way to be generous. And so too, if we are generosity is not just material generosity, but we could be offering someone some kind of protection from fear. We could be offering them the Dharma, offering them advice. And so too, when we are doing so, we should do so in a way that is really respectful, respects that they are another being who has feelings, not just sort of seeing them as nothing. And then there is being honoring the worthy. Really the word is like making puja. In India, we see like doing that for one's parents, those that we want to please, that we want to show a kind of reverence to. We honor them in various ways with offerings or with a kind of ceremony and so forth. So to please those who are worthy of our reverence, to give them a kind of honor, is then the second of these. And then we have cultivating love, which really is that attitude of wishing that all sentient beings, I mean, if we make it immeasurable love, all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness, right in line with the kind of attitude of immeasurable compassion that wishes for all sentient beings to be free of suffering and all of the causes of suffering. And so cultivating these attitudes, wishing that all have happiness and the causes of happiness, and that they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. And then we have immeasurable joy, this kind of joy wherein we see that others are happy and we want them to be able to hold on to that. We rejoice in that and want them to not be separated from that. This is a good antidote to our being jealous. Often when good things happen to others, there's the danger of, instead of us feeling happy for them, feeling a kind of jealousy and wondering why they have that. And then there is immeasurable equanimity. I mean, we don't view others without attachment and anger or hatred. We view them very partially, with making a lot of distinctions. These are my friends, those are my enemies, and so forth. When we see someone who's looking bad at us, we want to look even worse at them. But really, there's nothing that can happen except for that whole situation devolving, getting worse and worse. And so here, when it comes to the here it mentions in the verse love, but really all of the immeasurables, equanimity as well, is having this kind of attitude that applies to all sentient beings. And when it comes to these three actions, then being generous, we should do so, and there are various ways to be generous. It's not just material generosity, but being generous with advice, giving protection from fear in the sense of medicine, teaching others how to sustain and take care of themselves, helping others who are in a situation like an earthquake or another natural disaster. And really, when it comes to generosity, most work within the world is fulfilling the needs of beings. It is a form of generosity. And I mean, except for something like, say, if you're working on developing an atom bomb or other kinds of work like that, most work is doing something that is being a kind of generosity within society. And so if we know how to do so with a special kind of altruistic attitude, then all of our work can become part of generosity, this sort of respectful generosity.
오야. 다 니바디르다. 니바디 초여셔바서라. 초여배 간살이야. 닝고 샵도를 써봐 텐데 쇼여배 간살이야. 텐데 쇼바데시고라. 제가 소리스네 캠보다 랍도 중앙에서다 텐데 있나? 랍중기 캠보세로 로 닌조기 캠보세로 요라. 돈반나게도 쓰기와라. 텐데 있네 코트네 그 샵체 티치오라 쳐봐. 니바 두고라. 샵도 쇼여랍 텐데다 가소라. 샵지 쇼여랍 텐데다 패도 니바 두에 투 고요에 된다 가르치주네. 내가 필요에 담배도 필요에 가르치네. 시거라 투시거라. 네 캠보다 연대 라고 샹라세. 연대 첨부인게 지조를 팬도 첨부친게 람체장게로 가리나로 야 근데 신다 레게 돈에 팬도 칭게로 가리나 어때줄이야? 그 최외배 가사로 최외쳐봐서라. 최외배 가사를 쳐봐서라. 네바 자외배 닝구르 셔도 최동 쇼외배 가사리야. 최동 쇼와 다든다 어때시거라. 네가 저라. 샹야 쳐봐네세. 캠보다 연대 학바 샹라야 쳐봐네. 최외쳐봐서도 어디 버티자. 아니 잠배 준비해서 잠발에 소바시오라 잠바 쳔메 거 쳔메 땅요 쳔메 스테글라이 바 대조 쳔메 시도 시에도 가와 쳔메 잠바 쳔메 니지 쳔메 땅요 쳔메를 소바 대조 시거라 가올레서 쳔메 시로 대조들아 죽배 쳐서 그래서 내가 말 쪽숨들라 빵배 쳐 빵고에 돌고에 쳐 내가 들은 죽배 쳐 숨전에 쳐 주주래도도 just yeah, just
So, following respectful generosity, being respectfully generous. The second then is again honoring the worthy. So, here this refers to those who are like the abbots or preceptors. If we have taken vows from someone, the one who gave us those vows, as well as those who are worthy of reverence and service and respect. So, those who have particularly qualities greater than others, those who are worthy of being offered things in the sense of their having special kinds of qualities, to offer them or to serve them, whether it is offerings of something like incense and flowers and so forth, or those with great qualities, we can also serve anyone by giving them actual service, meeting their various needs, and showing them respect. But one should do that toward those who are worthy of those offerings, whether it is someone who has, say, given you vows or shown great kindness, who has great qualities. And then finally is love is really illustrative of all four of the immeasurables. And these then are the dharmas that are to be engaged in. So the 13 that came before were those to be abandoned, and these are the 3 to be actively pursued.
yeah, thank you, madam. I should do so. There's a matter. Thank you, yeah. That on the one day to do the Shesara. The Induka soda. Take a shambuto, Penangazu, Namju, Sochu, but the general, Sochu Pangba Sigara. Sochu Pangba said so much of the devil Janjage. Tipa Sochebe, Tipa Yomaramato, Sochu Pangba Maroa. Tiending Arazu Namjune, Tombalenga, Regeneco, Chisibato, Socheg Mass, Misseg Mass, Tikelangiora, Tikelandizako, Pay to Gora. Chanju Sambara Geneco, San Jabadong, teaching Massia, Kelandu, Kawachimala, the Tuesday Neto Yora, Kawayon de Yordo, Nikuba, Nada, Karina Kalasagana, Katinati, Kawayon de Yora, Chanju Sambatuzina, Tangarazo Oti. Nghe the pangi some je kelang bayina ne pang be pay yongura so ju pang be pay yongura so much deshana tikpa sag mar so chebe tikpa yo mar de so ju pang be pay ke yo maro pena kideshina miseg maro miseto maro tineshi kuma kuya da tu ma se tegra de ti pang be ke wa ke to maro tingara ju mele chi barwa 상에 nyeri 날 tombalange ina to ko kenye ina kichu ina karena chisi choe badu servte lange wara ti mena ya ko nyeri samlo tande o nge tire nyemolia shala tsawa kaya chigme sa ro ngode chuchu na ne shala doba neba ke chu choksum yore tezo kanga chigme sam jogbe chu to kanyo yo chigi samsan chebe na Nimadelia, Mima said, Soldier Pambata, Masimbalemba Pambata, Kanga Pain to Gure, Kyoto Gure. The man and it was then the coast, Kumakulu Macho, the mother Kumakulu Chuna, Kuyas of the Charter, the Kopambas Kemara, something as a near medicinal. Yabuchang Negudwa. Church said the church Tambuche, and go to Lamiko to the red wa. Gawachimang only given any thunder church ever to Japan to Marwa. Dur mato ya kone konde peya yungu marwa. Ta kiawa chima te senti le tende che chon keba sambu ye. Che chima de le tende che ti ya ke tane kone konde ya peya ko sam. Ene tarwa da tamche keba tozo chukgu samsang tenda ngondo lami kowan tuwa te peke chimbura. Miki chukpa tanda chudu shekdo ati. Kibu chungu kyanja marada. Kibu drengi kapso ti kaya chimbura. Kibu chembe kapso ti kaya chimbura. 사니버세트 톡도잖아. 추진 근저 연대 체라고 토스. 추진 버지. 딜라 메기 좁은 게 추진도 샤도와. 자도고 샹라 차와 방스 샹라 내가 총중 방바테네 손데 펜바 드로스 총중네 손데 빼동 차와 탐제 내가 탐제 방야. 펜바 드로가 탐제 드로에 장주 선바 찾아봐도 야섬야 고네고도 배야요라. 시축사도 되네 소고라. 근데 저도 저해야 돼. 그러나 저 가르쳤다 지금서는 와. 기부 중의 저지가 연하네. 겨와 전망에 손을 맞이를 하다 매일 도야기 저지가 와라. 뒤돈다를 따단다셔 저주도 냠슬랑 그래. 뒤전에는 라다 매일 끼그라. 지가라 몰라 뒤 공실이여서 아니 지가라 몰라 기회섬다 제디 지그라. 뒤에 뒤토리야. 첸델이야 틱바디 싸면에 겨왕아마 싸셔봐 요라. 대수 다야에서도 틱바디 샥바전에 다야여버데 틱바 유대이잖아. 뒤인데 거가서 겨 통만 매번에 미가제 세야지 등산 생긴도 미 동자 몸자 세야게 세기도 나게 된데 겨만 불 제일 길에서 겨 통만 매번에 싸셔봐 싸셔봐 마침발은 발로임을 쏘봐 최초 숨게 아니 틱바까지 싸야지. 뒤인데 최초 숨되다 겨와 통만 매번에 싸셔봐 틱바도 강가 만디버에서 샥바체 뒤돈다 차체와다 컨덴시아다 추바피에다 가르치나 뒤체베나 아니 나르사베 틱바도 다도라 틱발에 개요래 틱바 싹바 집에는데 빼체는 송고도 자 리리 춘중지나야 고 추강리선마 출 댐도래 샤라 자 대첨부터 바 동제 레벨 소샤나 아니 고 철을 땡도고 말아 텔레지고 제유나 대사 서칼이야 주신 전부 간대서도 메마음보 경계배 동자마부대 경계 속여라 그 레벨에 서자라 다들 중중지는 거리리는 마 소나마 댐도라 어디나시 뜻버셔야 돼 나마 마디레 텐데사데 마디레 티셔데 야부치 말에 야부 말에 두bun게 집으래 마디브레 삼사게 남주 연계시네 뜻버 양으로여라 그 가래나 예삼 티체고 삼티냐냐 마도 뜻벌 껴도 지에 마도나 뜻벌에 숙 전부 제제 중중지나 마도 그래 마 출야 팀도 짜도 팀보나 생각하죠 뜻벌 중중지나 빼 동해 전부 용해요라 시중의 중중에서 통중지교 말해서라 두지나 두 중중지나 고티사나 메시그라 뒤인데 그 개와 중중지나 두고래 대과 중중지나 방괴 탑시쳐 그래서 어떤데잖아 근데 소소를 데리지도 와 개와 정말 개와 양보라에도 소소랑 두가 교대 소소 사다 날사샤벌 개바체 단다 마사바체 티체나 단다 잠바다 저와든데 kon 밀펜도 kom나 tikba mambu 다도 요라 티체 소소 라와요 데레도 와 뒤인데 가서라 남베 뒤단다셰 최대 제바보요 말에서도 수수께 전부다 스티하고 그러마도네 제바보 매버셰 제바보 요게스네 고텔이야 겹스천다 가르네 결하셔 바섬 야치코라 이테서르다 티토시치요라 뒤에 매버셰 소수제대 마셰체 밀러라와조세대 매버셰네 가게 네가 두르려 내가 도와 제가 소수께 전부임바다 소소를 개천부임바 소수 제토야임바 소소를 상계를 여봐. 와 상계는 소소를 셈대야 붙이 와라. 교도서 파상나 상야요지. 근데 섬로다네. 밀루 야보지 토베 타쳐거지 제토 알레 최당부터 되고도. 뒤전에 이번 숨부터 강가 반제 영향 봐라. 교환에 교와 대주기 밀루 톱전 도샤그라. 뒤질라나 안 되겠지.
So here, this is important that particularly in relation to these 13 dharmas that we abandon, that we take the kind of active step of abandoning them in our mind. So the absence of doing a non-virtue doesn't get us the benefit of the virtue, like the opposite virtue. So for example, as a dog might not kill a human. They might not even be able to kill a human, but they aren't getting the kind of virtue of abandoning killing because they haven't made that sort of commitment. They're just not doing that non-virtuous action. They're not stealing, they're not engaged in sexual misconduct as well. But other than not incurring the virtue, they aren't incurring a positive kind of an action. And so here, when it comes to like the way that we get the benefit, whether we have taken a vow, whether that is a vow of ordination or a lay vow, we take that for the duration of this life. We are committing to engaging in certain actions for as long as we are alive. And if we've taken a bodhisattva vow, that's something that lasts even into future lives. We are able to, on the basis of having taken that vow, and when we transgress it, engaging in confession, we get the kind of benefit that comes from refraining from that, from actively making that kind of pledge to refrain. So whether we have taken vows that last for a life or many lifetimes in the case of bodhisattva vows, we can use the kind of system of taking a vow to be of our benefit, even on a daily basis, of just thinking, well, I'm not going to engage in harm. There are these 13 activities, these negative dharmas that I am going to avoid. I'm going to abandon for the course of this day. And by making that kind of pledge, then you gain the positive, virtuous energy of having made that kind of abandonment. And so here, although when we don't have the thought to do some particular action, okay, we're not getting the non-virtue of that, the thought might arise, like, oh, I might just steal this thing. And unless we've made that kind of vow, put that restraint on ourselves, we might well engage in such a negative action. And so by taking that vow, we help to actually restrain our behavior as well as get the kind of positive virtue that comes from not engaging in those actions. And so here, this is really something that we should look at not in a kind of diminutive way as like, oh, this isn't very important, but this is something that is the essential first step without which we can't proceed to anything else. So today we have this good birth with these kinds of good conditions, and it's something that we should view as extremely important to be able to ensure that we have such a life again. This is really the essential practice of the being of small scope, and this is important for the being of middling scope as well. Again, if we don't have the kind of conditions of this sort of birth with these kinds of good situation, we can't expect to be able to proceed. And so having this kind of practice of abandoning the 10 non-virtues, or this case, the 13 negative dharmas, is something that is important for a being who is training in the small scope, training in the middling scope, and training in the great scope. For a bodhisattva who is on the second ground, they achieve a surpassing practice of ethical conduct, really the ethics of abandoning the 10 non-virtues. So we shouldn't see it as like, oh, this is a small sort of thing that is done by those people who are doing the small scope. But really, it is the basis upon which we are able to get to that state of Buddhahood. Because with every sort of negativity that we get rid of, every fault that we eliminate, we are proceeding towards that state in which we have eliminated all faults. And all good qualities that we develop are then the foundation for attaining that culmination of all good qualities. And so here, whether one is doing this kind of restraint out of wanting to gain a good rebirth as a human or a god, or whether it is for the purpose of liberation or the state of omniscience, this is a common kind of a practice that is really the scope of which is determined by our intention. And purifying those kinds of negativities that we have done in the past is another important way to ensure that we get a good rebirth in our next life. Really, when we look around, we can see there are those who have killed many hundreds, thousands of beings. And in our past lives, it is certain that we too have done things like that. And so making prostrations, doing prayers and various practices in order to really get rid of those negativities is something that is quite important. Our negativities are really only have one quality, and that is that they can be purified. And it really, like, in the way that if we think about metal, metal is something where if we have just a little bit of it and we put it in water, it's going to immediately sink. But if you flatten it out, all of a sudden you have a whole different thing. We see these ships that can carry hundreds of people, these huge machines. And so what we do, how we sort of transform our negativities based upon the practice of purification is sort of like that, whether they're going to be just a big chunk that will sink or whether it's something that is sort of spread out. We hammer that metal out and flat, it's able to float. And so here we have, again, this opportunity in that the life we have right now is something quite precious. And we shouldn't look at like, oh, well, that's just a little negativity. It's not really a big deal. I don't care about that. In the way that if we have a little bit of poison, we wouldn't think like, oh, that's just a little bit of poison. It's not really a big deal. It's something that is dangerous. And so too, when we have this kind of autonomy, we have the freedom to be able to determine what will happen in our future life. It is in our own hands. And so we have this great responsibility. Although we go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, we have this place where we are placing our confidence. The real place of our confidence is in our own actions, in that we have the power in our hands. What we are doing with our body, speech, and mind determines what we will be able to encounter in the future. So while we have this great responsibility, we have this importance, this life, this precious life that we have right now is something that we can take advantage of. And we have the ability because we have Buddha nature. We have this ability to change. And so we need to bear this great responsibility. And that begins with the foundation of really giving up these actions in a conclusive way.
Oh yeah. Tangan zu deri da karsa. Di wo de ya. Le ton che wa bashile. Chue me se. Te dar te ne. Shan la ne ba pon me shan la pendo yo ma yesi do. Oh ti inde ta namba ka ta chu na shi chana. Ba tang da de kar she go resana. Sanje chum den de ge sung be chue de ya. Ane shan le ya chawa pan ya ta pemba tu be. 장바단 제와 시송게 뒤니날 ჩვენ 드르인저 최 사마탐제 샹레 차와방바다 펜바드원이나 드르라 꽤 강가데 셴 심전이 양아라 저 개와 가둘라나 심전데 냠도 지소난 되고라 뒷바 강가 꽤 강가드네 용거라 지소날 대두산 심전 찍찍을 따다한테 쳬바 쳬단 만데네 마 두르두르두르야라 네 쳬바 사르사르다네 야야르야르 두고야래 근데 지소데 코페 심전데 페케 참부 가도 이나 야르로나 콘솔레 따다 야르로네 라야르 두고야래 두르로나 콘솔레 쳬바 녜다네 마녜 바체네 마 두르 두고야라 어디 근데 쳬쳬서나 샹레 차와방바다 페바드원이나는 드르로 인서래 샹레 차와방바데게 짜와이는데 용거라 샹레 펜바드바데게 잠베윤데 용거라 펜도는 콜레 대와 용거래 삼 네바전에 콜레 동해 용거래 티마드브레 티니나 드르고라 나 산제 유고반 톡베스도 샹레 펜바드베던 두도 타르와 톱스도 차다다 녀모 콘동하제 삼방게스도 샹레 네바방바다 펜바드베 셔지 두도 나저 잠바다 니지 꼼스네 다가라 어제 쳐 가르쳐나야 샹레 차방에다 펜바드베 니나는 두도 티 시손이 셰게와라 티 시손에네 껴와치마 라라 대와다 껴와 야부치 톱고요네 상부디 톱고래 차와방고를 펜바드고래 라라야더니 타바다 탐제 켐바 톱고요네 심전 탐제가 된다다 심 자체로 체로다네 닝도 체로다네 소소 된다 자산의 삼주매바 심전 현재 된다 주베데 랑게 된다에 바 삼고야라 랑게 된다 설로가 매바 쳐도 어제 된데 그 삼로 자케네 셔야돼 단다 딸 셔야돼 차와방 펜바도 심전 된다 조전이 셔도 주주 참마 탐제 때려도 어디인데 된데 제바본 지대 제바보 여발라 심마소래 랑게 잠바다 자와라 시손네 랑게 심전라 펜바트바다 너바게데 파파네 펜바트 텔레 시손네 에네 konde 앞에 시사송거라 제인데 데이터부 쳐데 샨달이야 요 마레스 되시거다 Sanje Chumden de Sumbe, Roa, and a ran, Shala Toa Pamba Pemba Truba Tilla Shisone, Kone Kondo Yapeg, Church Shego, Ramando Lami Kovane, Tarwa Tamji Batoviate, or Teta Bude, Chulu Shandalia, Yoma Rese. Shandatu Tillen Do de Chene, Kasha Kasha Danimelo Soliora, or Tinduka Soda, Chuki Chujin Sarah, Maju said in the Yugudo Mimade. Simje tai Chujin Sarah, the Shayora, Tato Tule, Segama Butchene, Ko Shichune, Yayabu Sandra. And it Simje to the Kashe, Chawachene Keo Mare, the Kujo now the Sarah, the Yungora. That the Zuran the Nambachene Uncle, the Kelek Medwa, or Tinduka Soda. Shala Chawache, Gadisu Cuba. Manju Chala Sobata, oh, Tene, Tide Tuzukaga, Nambata, Tichani, Digiomara, or that is Segurda, Tizu Shandal Mevate. Ludon Chibatala Nese, that the Kagaling me, allo sulkin de Yora, Ludon Chibas, Sobol, Soso Calete, Ra, Mengatambas, Sechobata, Mengatamatan, Benat and Yungara. Kalamasene Sobo be Nyamjune. Teaching Chigore. The Menga Tembase Menga Yel Mesha, Desha, Kavol Meta, Dele Meta, Suzuki de Nimagia, Sixu, Menga Sitira, Choshil Mere Repar, and then Nimag Sixu, Tenet Muna Sugra Kalayora, Sobol Kalayungra, Titungema, Sobo come to an Tebata Rese, Tinashi, Manevice, Yalalamba Chete, and the Yungua. O Tezu Kanga de Nambachan de Madrid Resungura. Say Chubata Menga Chambala Sabo, Tezuta, and then Nambe Churchana, the church at Rigma Rese. Church said the Shana Pemba Truba, never Pambata, Pemba Truba Chico Rese. Titazun Rigma dos, Ral never chick to some Shandal, never chever de Kugamamushi Gora. O Tichilamia. Zudan Nambe Chumato, Shanda Titulio Mares. Casually shake door, yeah.
So, here, then the last line of verse 10 sort of summarizes in brief, these are the Dharma. And this then turns to a kind of discussion of how this Dharma and these Dharma practitioners are not taught in other systems. So, here, really, the Buddha, the teachings of the Buddha Dharma, is contained within these two, really, non-harm and benefiting others. When we think about our lives, we take rebirth and we take rebirth with others. We interact in societies. We interact with one another and are creating karma in relation to them. So it becomes very important then to abandon harm and to benefit others in the sense of these have been identified by the Buddha as being the causes of our happiness. Really, that all of the practices that one can speak of within the Dharma can be contained within these two, to not harm others and to bring about a benefit for them. So whether it is abandoning the kind of causes that lead to harming others that in turn will lead to you taking rebirth in the lower realms, that is the Dharma that is taught for the being of small scope, and it abandons harming others in order to create benefit, in this case just for that individual. And whether it is the kind of Dharma that teaches liberation, they too act in ways that don't harm others in order to secure their own personal peace. And so this really, and of course for the Mahayana, this is indispensable, this foundation of not harming others and working for their benefit, as really to do good now, to be of benefit to others now, is leading to good in the future as well. And so when one has gotten to the point where you are able to exchange the kind of aims of your own aims for the aims of others and work mainly, primarily only for the benefit of others, that's really when one has entered into the Mahayana. But this is the foundation. One increases and develops these more and more. The foundation of abandoning harming others and engaging in activities that are for the benefit of them. And this culminates in the state of Buddhahood. Now, here, when it comes to this kind of system, it is distinct from others, wherein we see, and this begins in verse 11, Dharma does not come about merely through engaging in physical austerities. Through that type of practice, one neither ceases harming others nor does one benefit them. And again, this foundation of all of the Buddha Dharma is ceasing to harm others and creating benefit for them. And when we look at the practices in some other traditions, particularly like in some Hindu traditions, they engage in austerities, practices like, for example, the 5 fires or extreme fasting and so forth, in order to purify their negativities. They say that this is something that will lead to the purification of negativities. So like, for example, the 5 fires is having one in front of you and behind you and to the right and to the left. And then there's the fire of the sun burning above you, and that like you're sweating out your negativities, essentially, is the kind of practice. Or engaging in extreme fasting in order to purify the body of negativities. And as it says here, although that it is inflicting some kind of harm on the body, it does nothing in order to increase the practice of ceasing to harm others or benefit others.
뭐야, 다들 뒤져서.
So our time is up for today, so we will have to stop there.
Thank you so much for these teachings today, Gen Rinpoche. And to Katrina, thank you for your translation. Please join us again next Monday at 9 a.m. Pacific for the next series. And we'll finish with some dedications.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Lobsang's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kam Niryatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May the born have no decline, but increase forevermore.
Yeah, tuche na gela, dunja jema jeyon.
뭐야, 도대체.